feature presentation.
Welcome back to another Untitled movie review. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rohrbeck, alongside he's allergic to tomatoes, but he's tomato meter approved, Eric Marchin.
Matt, we are not dressed to impress, but we are going to be talking about
How dare
the
you.
outfit.
How dare you? I have my best handmade Cineplex Cineclub hoodie on. So,
Do you think Mark Rylance cut that?
I think personally, I could see him meticulously putting this together on a nice table with some nice measurements in chalk. And my wedding's coming up. Everyone, I don't know if everyone knows this. Well, I mean, hopefully, knock on wood, third time's a charm, gonna happen. I gotta get a suit made. And this movie both gave me anxiety about that and made it look like the coolest thing ever. So I'm like, someone putting together like a handmade suit. I'm like, man, there's nothing there's many things cooler, but just seeing the process that goes into that seemed like I don't know how anyone would have the patience for this or would enjoy doing this, but some people are very good at that, and I want to get a custom suit made, and you need to get one too, and we'll go do that soon. So maybe Mark Rylance will do that. Today we are reviewing Graham Moore's The Outfit, starring Mark Rylance, Zoey Deutch, Johnny Flynn, Dylan O'Brien, Nikki, Amuka-Bird, Simon Russell Beale, and more. Eric, how are you? You want to go get a custom suit made or what?
Sure. I mean, again, if it's Mark Rylance doing it, why not? And I think the strongest parts of this movie, I think it's what I love about documentaries as well, is when you see somebody who's good at what they do
Yeah.
working in their field and not having a scene interrupted by plot or moving the story forward. We're just kind of in the character's world and we're seeing them do what they do so well, and watching the meticulous nature of Mark Rylance is, and this is a pun I guess, is a sheer delight in so many ways. It really is, like, the methodical nature of him creating this suit with a voiceover that kind of talks about, what defines a suit and how you can kind of, gauge based on the person who's wearing it and how to sort of, tailor it to their specificity,
Their personality.
yeah. And also that, the distinction that he's not a tailor but he is a cutter, and he still owns his own tailoring shop, and this takes place in Chicago in 1956 in mid-December. And instead of being a single take movie like Alfred Hitchcock's Rope, which is very much an influence on this film, it's a single location movie that kind of feels like it could be adapted into a play.
Theater.
Yeah, and it does have a theater kind of quality to it, to the point where, like, one of the mobsters is played by Simon Russell Beale, who is known as a great English stage actor. So it kind of makes sense that, again, also during
the whole movie feels like a play for sure.
Yeah, and even during the pandemic, it's like, okay, why not sequester a cast and crew and do this little
spot.
kind of intimate movie? Where the film fails, I think, a little bit, or what I was least interested in, is the twists and turns of this one night story where this tailor, or this cutter specifically, is affiliated with a local Chicago mob, and them kind of getting entangled with another up and coming mob as well, and sort of them fighting for dominancy, and then also wanting to become a part of this bigger group that was once ran by Al Capone called the Outfit, and them getting messages, and also the early adoption of technology with a recording device, specifically in a tape that actually gives clues to who the rat is that the FBI has been sort of basically documenting for the last little while. So there's a lot of balls to juggle here, and the twists and turns try to kind of pull the wool over your eyes, but I don't think it works all the time. And some of the performances compared to Mark Rylance are a little bit caricature based, and I think that kind of hurts the movie as well. But just based on the central lead and some of the production design and the influences it's taking from, I would say that it is at least a VOD or streaming worthy film when it comes out, even though it is a theatrical release only right now. Mark Rylance is the reason to see this film.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with you. And it's one of those movies that I don't have a lot to say about because I thought it was perfectly fine all the way through, other than Rylance being the one that kind of stood out of being like, oh, he's genuinely like really, really good in this movie. And he kind of carries the entire thing. I even like Zoey Deutch and Dylan O'Brien. Like I like both of them. Dylan O'Brien, one of those guys that I like more and more the more I see him, and I do agree with you that everyone else is doing that kind of the mob, like kind of mob caricature kind of thing throughout the whole thing, where Rylance is giving like a real performance.
Well,
But
Beale, I think as
um,
well, it has this really
yeah,
wonderful
sure, yeah.
moment where they talk about their tools of the trade.
hmm And I just kind of, I don't know. It's one of those movies, and this will be a compliment to the movie, but another movie that I kind of just end up zoning out almost halfway through is Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. And it's just one of those things where it's just like, it's that genre where I'm just like, I don't know, it just doesn't vibe with me completely. And I know it's good. It's just, I just kind of like shut off halfway through and just kind of let it happen. And I don't really have a strong opinion. And that's not great criticism, but it's just sort of personal taste in the sense that I can acknowledge that what's happening is well made and it is very theatrical in this case. Tinker Tailor's very different. But I just kind of end up going, all right, I kind of understand what this is, and I'm not super interested in it anymore. And which I think isn't necessarily, the movie's fault. Maybe it's partly my fault, but I think there's a moment halfway through that I'm like, okay, and then it kind of changes gears, and I just kind of, I don't know. I think it's totally fine, and I think Rylance is really good.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with the Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy thing, just in the sense of like I think that that's actually a really well put
Totally, I just
together
mean
film. Thomas Alfredson. There's more going on there. Where I think with
absolutely
Graham Moore, who is mostly known as a screenwriter, won the Oscar for The Imitation Game, is making his directorial debut, and I think this is actually a really solid debut, just in terms of
sure.
if you're gonna make your first movie, like a lot of people always kind of throw everything at the screen, including the kitchen sink. It's like, well, I might not get a chance to do this again, but I think
This feels restrained a little bit,
like
yeah.
the lead, it's very refined, and yeah, it does kind of fall into some tropes and conventions of the period and the mobster gangster genre, and it's weird when you have, a British filmmaker writing American lines, because usually again there's something more of a finesse, where this does feel very, again, um a little bit rough around the edges, and very stereotypical of what you would see in like even like a James Cagney gangster movie, right? But again, like I really do like that, there are references to Alfred Hitchcock's Rope, one being very obvious, but there's one that isn't, which is in the sense like if you are a film fan you'll know it right away, but like there's this shot of these windows, these higher windows, where you see like sometimes like a car pulling in, like the headlights of a car reflection, and it reminded me of like the scenes where like Jimmy Stewart is kind of looking up at this kind of like high line with windows as well, and the neon lights of this sign that's nearby this apartment reflecting on the windows. And then the other movie it kind of weirdly reminded me of, especially in the third act, because it does get a little bit more nihilistic, is like Michael Mann's Thief, where the idea of, you put everything on the line, and this movie I don't think necessarily pulls it off, but at least there's enough goodwill because of Rylance's performance and even his voiceover, and the way that he, handle certain characters and scenes and what he is willing to do. You're always just fascinated by that performance. And I
hmm
I actually do think Zoe Deutch out of the American cast is the best in terms of her interactions with
Mhm.
Rylance, even though again it is kind of contrived, their relationship and the kind of the
Sure.
father-daughter thing, but like,
Yeah,
and
yeah. There's that
they
one
never
moment
say
is
it
like,
specifically. Like
yeah.
it's like, oh, like if I were your, and that's a little too kind of, I think,
That was the
cutesy.
exact scene I was gonna bring up. There is one very
But
like
she's very good, and like she's
I agree.
someone who's always, I think, good in stuff. Like Before I Fall, Everybody Wants Some. So yeah, and I like their interactions together, and kind of her having her own agenda and her own world and wanting to explore the world, and him
Love
kind
snow globes.
yeah, and him kind of being the opposite of already of having his time and kind of being content
Just
in
wanted to
where he
settle in
is.
one location. Yeah.
Yeah, so there, that works. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of Johnny Flynn. Like every time he's in a movie, I always feel like he is the weakest
That
link.
dude, it's exactly what I thought. And
Or,
he's that kind of caricature thing we're talking about that I was just like, it
yeah,
seems like,
I'm gonna get you.
yeah.
I'm gonna get you by the end of the night. See,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
you're
Yeah.
trying to pull a
And that
fast one on me.
yeah, and it's just like it's a little much when you're just like, "Ooh, man, you got to tone it down a little bit to be on the same level
But
as other
he's
people."
always like
And
that. Like even when like he's in other
even
movies that I've liked, like Beast with Jesse Buckley, or
yeah,
in Emma with Anya Taylor Joy. Like he has an interesting look to him,
yes, yeah.
but his performances are always so mannered, and you'd think that like the manners in, or the stereotypes would work in his favor in this case, but they don't.
Yeah, and even Dylan O'Brien has a lot of that too. You see, and he's wearing a big suit, and he's just like,
But
I
that
don't know if I
works
can.
because he's the
Yeah,
son of a mobster, so there's this
yes,
weird nepotism, and like
nepotism thing. Yeah, yeah,
son
yeah.
wearing his father's clothes and trying to be a
That's exactly
poser.
what I thought of.
Yeah.
It reminded me of when I made fun of John Cena because he's such a big dude that it looks like he's wearing his dad's suit just because it awkwardly fits him. And it's
Which
like,
is
yeah,
kind of like
that's
even Peacemaker in a weird
yeah,
way.
yes, and it exactly reminded me of that thing of like, you had to borrow a suit from your dad to try to look professional or whatever, but it didn't quite fit you. And I thought like, yeah, that's why again I like Dylan O'Brien. He popped up recently on Curb Your Enthusiasm, and I thought he was great. And I just love in Monsters, which is I think such a pleasant surprise.
He's
And
great in Deepwater Horizon.
yeah, and even the
Um,
Maze Runner trilogy, not a great trilogy, but I'm like, I think he's actually pretty decent as the lead in those, and they're, I think, totally serviceable movies that I think get maybe worse as they go along. I forget, but still enjoyed them.
he's really good in, like, just in terms of like, he's always seems to be like a welcome presence, and
And on
um
Twitter, he's great too.
yeah, yeah, I really liked his line about like having to put in a catheter while watching the Batman. Uh, so like I really do like him quite a bit,
Yeah,
and yeah, he's always a welcomed presence, and I think he actually has another movie with Zoey Deutch coming out later this summer. So yeah, he's always kind of fun to see, and I think he does, like, even though his performance is also very stilted, I think he is a lot of fun, and I also did like his interactions with Mark Rylance, in the way that like
sure,
he
yeah,
Mark Rylance is very polite and cordial, and always refers to him as someone above him, and I really like the way that, again, Rylance kind of navigates this kind of tricky terrain of surviving this one kind of crazy night. And I just like that genre in general, where it's like all these like horrifying events kind of happen in one night, whether they be
off
movies
screen
like,
and have to come there and deal
yeah,
with
and that
them and
also
stuff like
works as
that
a
too.
play as
Yeah,
well, right? Like certain events do happen off screen, and it kind of embraces that. Like it doesn't need to cut away from this one location. The only cutaways are just exterior shots of the outside, and even the outside, like the snow on the ground has this kind of fake quality, this facade to it, but it works because of the way that this movie is presented like a stage play. Even though it is still somewhat more cinematic, it might not be as cinematic as something more recently like The Father, which truly did something different and unique. This kind of embraces its tropes, but does
it's
it
the
really
opposite. It's a
well.
movie that's imitating a stage play instead of
Yeah.
stage play being transition. And I think that definitely works. Like I agree with everything that you're saying. Like I loved even in the opening bits of the movie of just establishing his relationship with this mob and like them coming in and depositing the money in the back room. Like, and it's all just so casual. And he has these, he just continues his work and just kind of acknowledges them as they come in, or they have these kind of, you know, conversations about nothing, or even something like that, where it's just like, yeah, he knows these people, and he has to deal with this thing, and he kind of just lets it happen because he just wants to mind his own business, kind of thing. And then as the plot develops and you get more of that, I think it is kind of interesting. So I have nothing wrong with the movie, but it's a weird thing where, like, we just reviewed the Adam Project, which I gave a soft pass to, and I'll probably end up giving this kind of the same almost rating, even though this is clearly a better movie. It just didn't completely land with me. Where it's just, they landed with me for different reasons, but I'm like a little bit not even negative on this movie. I'm just apathetic maybe towards it, which I also am towards Adam Project, but in a very, very different way. So yeah, I think this movie, for if you're interested in it, I think you'll pretty much, like you said, enjoy it on like a streaming watch or something like that. I don't think it necessarily has any huge highs, or like, other than maybe Rylance's very, very solid performance, and especially after seeing him in something like Don't Look Up, or where he's just ridiculous. Like, it's nice to kind of see him give like a really, really great performance again. So yeah, I enjoyed the movie. I just kind of am like, I don't know if I'll ever think about it again, or if I'll. It's gonna be one of those movies I forgot that I watched, or forget kind of what it exactly is. So I'm gonna give it a 3. I could go a 3.5, but I'm gonna give it a 3 just because, like, I thought it was perfectly decent.
Yeah, I'm also going to give it a 3, and I think it's one of those films that, like, it does bring up some interesting stuff throughout the movie, specifically, again, like how technology is on the cusp of changing and how that affects these characters, and the way that they talk about this tape, and like finding a player to listen to it, and how, back then, like, it's almost impossible to find something. But even like the way, you know Mark Rylance kind of jokes about his kind of backstory, being that, he came from the UK and worked in the Seville, and then kind of, the reason why he moved over is because blue jeans became kind of
Oh
this
yeah, that was
thing. And,
funny.
and again, like, that's looking at not only fashion being cyclical, because blue jeans at that time are considered like this new trendy thing that maybe won't last, but obviously they do. But like, you look at sort of, technology and fashion kind of being this gap that is kind of being bridged by the two. And like, the idea that when something new is introduced, at the beginning of it, it's looked at like a novelty, and there are people that are going to be interested in it, but will it stand the test of time? And in both cases they do. I mean, obviously tape decks and recordings kind of advanced even further as they went on, and now we just have, everything's all digital and it's not tangible like it was. But there is something interesting there with, like, a classically made cut suit versus, like, an industrial made assembly line pair of jeans, and not
Mhm.
having really any soul to it. And I think that that could have been explored even more than it is in the film. So yeah.
Cool. Um, Thank you all for listening or watching. We really do appreciate it. We have other reviews that we would love for you guys to check out right now. We have reviews for a lot of aforementioned movies, like the Adam Project. We also have a review for Domi She's Turning Red, which is now streaming on Disney Plus. Mimi Caves Fresh, which is now streaming on Disney Plus in Canada and Hulu in the US. Our friend Joey Noel joined us for that, or joined me for that. Eric was off that day. We also have a spoiler cast for the Batman, which you can check out on the Untitled Movie Podcast channel, or on YouTube if you're there. And a lot more, both on YouTube and podcast services. So if you want a one-stop shop for everything, just head over to Letterboxd, Untitled_movies. You can find our HQ, where we post all of our video reviews, all of our podcasts, our official ratings, which is an average between Eric and mine, or if they're the same like this, it's easier. Um, and the Critics' Choice Awards are this weekend. Sorry, no, they would have already passed as you're listening to this. Sorry, I'm getting already. I'm getting. We record a lot at different times,
Yeah.
everyone. So ignore that. But you can probably check out our analysis of the awards. What won? I have no idea at this point. But go check out our newest podcast on the Untitled Movie Podcast page, where Eric and I go over all of the award winners from the Critics' Choice Awards and more. As always, my name is Matt Rohrbeck. You can find more of my work around the internet, but mostly at Untitled Podcast, moviepodcast.com, and on all of those social medias at Matt Rohrbeck. I'm going to go back to sleep.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I'm Eric Marchin. You can find more of my video reviews on rogerstv.com/cinemascene and on the social medias at EM6211.
Until next time.
You'll never take me alive, coppers. See?
See?
Yeah.